I had a campsite location picked, the meadow near the Divide Pass patrol cabin. Flat ground, flowing water, recommended to me by everyone who'd done it before. And then I walked up onto that pass and I called out, "Hey bear," and a grizzly came at me 3 times. Grizzly bear. Oh boy, and was charging at me too. By the time I crested that pass and finally gave that bear enough space, that's when I saw the digging. Holes just meters apart. The whole place was torn up. She'd been working that pass for a very, very long time. So I didn't stop at the patrol cabin. I pushed all the way to the Red Deer River, close to 30 kilometers, and my legs had nothing left. I didn't care. The mountain had already made my campsite decision for me. If you're camping in the backcountry, you're a guest. And today, I'm going to show you how to act like a welcome one. Well, we're here. Ooh. Oh my God, yeah. So, let me set up and I'll take you through the day and say goodnight. Oh man. All right, most of you watching this are probably planning 1 or 2 trips this summer. You're either heading out to a well-traveled national park trail with established campsites, maybe some bear lockers or hangs, or you're getting a bit more adventurous in wilderness areas where no picnic table is waiting for you. These are fundamentally different experiences. Today, we're talking about one thing: campsite decisions specifically through the lens of bear safety. The single most consistent pattern I've noticed out here is this: people prepare hard for the reactive moment when a bear shows up, and they underinvest in the proactive one, the 20 minutes before you pull out your tent. So here's what you're going to learn today: how to read the environment before you stop for the night, how to understand what kind of bear country you're actually in, and how to set up your night so that if something does happen, you're not starting from scratch at 2 a.m. in the dark.
Another eventful evening. So about 5 a.m. I hear Jim in his tent going, "Hey, hey." So something tripped his lines. So, you know, walking by the tent, hits the guy lines. So Jim says at first he thought it was like, you know, maybe a branch fell off a tree and, you know, stuff happens like that, right? Well, then it happened again. And now we think we see where it might have peed.
Let me be specific about what proactive campsite reading actually looks like. There are 4 things: sign, food source, escape geometry, and topography. That's your checklist. 4 reads before the tent goes up. And Divide Pass taught me the first one the hard way. Day 4 of the Clearwater Red Deer Circuit. Peters Creek had been relentless. 10 fords, trail markers gone, but then the terrain opened up. Meadows, animals everywhere, that alive feeling you get on the high ground. I called out, "Hey bear," what we're all taught. That call provoked a charge. In fact, as I said, it provoked 3 separate full-speed runs toward me. I gave it the widest berth I could, worked up a rise to the left. Coming up that pass, that's when I saw the digging. Holes, as I said, just meters apart. The whole place was churned up. She'd been there digging for a while. She came back out of her hole and she tracked me all the way up the ridgeline. So I want to come back to what that surveillance meant because it changes everything. But first, what advance warning actually looks like. The following September, remote Banff, Upper Red Deer River Random Zone, solo. The trail was telling a story from the first 100 meters. Diggings everywhere, scat all along the route, fresh and old. September bears in hyperphagia putting on 20 to 30% of their body weight before winter. That density of sign means one thing: active feeding zone. I reached the lake, right next to where I would have camped. A berry patch, branches bending under a heavy load. I moved away from it, crossed back over the Red Deer River, and camped on the other side. Wall-to-wall sign on the Douglas Lake side. The other bank, 0. No scat, no diggings, no indication a bear had even been there at all. That was the campsite decision. Not dramatic, not a close call, just paying attention to what the ground was telling me. The amount of bear scat and diggings, I mean, it reminded me a bit of Divide Pass that year where I had that bear charge me 3 times. Not the scat necessarily, but the diggings. This whole trail's dug up. So, the 4 reads. Number 1, sign. Tracks, diggings, scat, torn up logs, overturned rocks. That's all the stuff that tells you that a bear's been around. And recently, age matters. Old scat is information, fresh diggings are a flag. Number 2, food source and the absence of it. What's in bloom? What's fruiting? Is there a root field, a berry patch, a ground squirrel colony adjacent to where you want to be for the night? A bear doesn't know your campsite is there. It knows the food source is there, and it's going to be back regardless of you. But here's the flip side, one that I've come to trust over time. Sometimes you're moving through terrain where there's genuinely nothing for a bear to eat. Talus, scree, a drained rocky valley with no visible food ecology whatsoever. A bear would have to be just simply passing through to get somewhere else to be in that area. The absence of food is a legitimate data point in your environmental read. Read the whole picture, not just what's there, but also read what isn't there. I didn't see any sign on that side of the river at all, like zero. No scat, no diggings, nothing. No sign that bears even live there. This is what I call escape geometry. If something pushes past deterrence at 2 a.m., where do you go? Cliff behind you? River you can't cross in the dark? Think about that before you're exhausted, before it's dark, and while you can still see the terrain around you and make a clear-headed decision. How am I getting out of here in the dark if something goes down? And topography. Are you sitting in a drainage where anything moving down off a high pass has to funnel directly through your camp? Listen, some campsites are beautiful, but badly positioned. Great views, wrong geometry.
He says last night, right when we were going to bed in that creepy, spooky camp spot, right? He's like, you know, I've just been sensing bear all day. I can just feel it.
Yeah.
Then we got in our tents and slept right next to our food, right on the only trail that the animals could use if they want to come through this valley.
So back to that surveillance on Divide Pass and why it mattered. As you probably know, if you've watched any of the videos here on the channel, I found out about 2.5 years later, she wasn't a transient animal moving through unfamiliar ground. She'd spent her entire life on that pass, raised her cubs there. That was her territory. When my voice provoked those charges, it wasn't startled at close range. She responded to the sound of me because I was in her space, and she decided that required a response. When surveillance follows retreat deliberately in the open, that bear hasn't finished deciding. Take it seriously and let it affect where you camp that night. There was a lot of digging up there today, which is why I'm not in that meadow near the patrol cabin. I thought, a little extra mileage for the old guy, right? Just a quick pause. I did want to say if this kind of framework video is useful to you, please subscribe to the channel. That's what I'm building here all season when I'm not out on the trail doing expeditions. I'm going to make content for those of you who are actually out there, who are planning to be out there and running real trips. That's the whole point. So stick with me, subscribe, and let's keep moving. Everything I just described applies to one specific context. Remote terrain, no infrastructure, random camping. The environment is all you've got. Now, let's talk about the other kind, because a lot of people spend most of their time there, and the rules are genuinely different. West Coast Trail, established, busy, managed campsites, high traffic trail. I wake up one morning, and there's a black bear sow and her cub up a spruce tree right above my tent. Oh my God, there's a cub. There's a cub! It's a female! Just up there. She could not have been less interested in what was happening below her, probably nursing. Bear is still up there. It's up, just up there, right there. No interest in leaving. It's almost like it found a daybed. Somebody nearby decided this was the moment for an air horn. A couple of long blasts, right there, right by the bear, and the bear didn't flinch. By the way, for all you proponents of air horns, useless. A guy just tried to scare it away with an air horn and they just looked at us like we were all crazy. So here's the thing. That's not the bear failing to behave correctly. That's a habituated animal responding exactly as you'd expect. She's probably heard hundreds of air horns over the years on that trail ever since she was a cub. She'd learned that humans on the West Coast Trail aren't a threat. That air horn was just an annoying noise. What's funny is I had breakfast right under that tree. I went up under the rain and sat right by that tree and had breakfast, and they were probably up there. But an air horn in remote backcountry where a bear has had almost no meaningful human contact? Highly effective at night. Genuinely alarming to an animal that's rarely encountered it. On a high traffic trail with habituated wildlife, you may have already lost that tool. Know which country you're in before you need to know it. Now here's something that doesn't come up often enough. Sometimes you're in a random zone, a dispersed camping area, and you come across what looks like an established campsite. old fire ring, worn tent spots, an obvious eating area. And these are often old horse outfitter camps built over many years of use by people thinking about horses and not backpackers, and certainly not what we call bear triangles. I mean, let's picture a triangle. One corner where you sleep, one corner where you cook, one corner where you store your food. At an old outfitter camp, those corners are typically collapsed. The first time I actually mapped one out in my head, sleeping, kitchen, food storage, everything was within about 30 feet of each other. Beautiful old site, completely compressed. No usable triangle whatsoever. As I mentioned, leave no trace. Right. They say use an existing site rather than create new impact. I agree with that. But inheriting an established looking site doesn't mean inheriting a safe setup. Look at it critically before you get comfortable. You just simply may need to reconfigure things before the tent goes up. On properly managed parks trails, say in the US or Canada, the site has been designed for you. So use the infrastructure. It exists because people thought hard about this problem. That said, even with managed infrastructure, there are exceptions worth knowing. For example, there are sites in Jasper National Park of Canada where geometry isn't ideal. Sleeping area, cooking area, bear pole, all within steps of each other. Where do you put your tent? Obviously, that's our tent and that's the eating area, and that will not be the eating area. We're actually going to eat over there, a little further away from the tent. The other thing I'll say that I'm not happy about is this is the trail. When you're at a site like that, your protocols have to go up a level. You're methodically, obsessively clean. Everything, every time. Now, a quick word on the advice that circulates online sometimes about cooking away from your campsite. Stop a mile or a kilometer out, eat your food on the trail, and then hike in so there are no food smells on you or near your tent. I genuinely do not know where these people are backpacking. In the remote grizzly terrain I travel, that is simply not a relevant risk. The bear I'm dealing with has rarely, if ever, encountered a human campsite. It's probably not learned that a camp stove means food in a tent, right? In remote grizzly country, focus your energy on campsite selection and proper food storage. That's what matters. Which brings me to storage. The single biggest practical variable between the two types of bear country. Managed campsite? Use whatever the park provides. Bear hang, food locker, pole, whatever. Everything with a scent goes in it, not just the food. Your toothpaste, your sunscreen, your lip balm. These are the things people do consistently forget. Get them in the food bag. If you're random camping, dispersed camping in remote terrain, you're going to need an interagency grizzly bear committee approved bear container. It can be a hard-sided can, it can be a bag that's approved, but you're going to need one, or maybe two. What you're not going to bring is a stuff sack. You're not going to do a branch hang, because I'm going to be completely direct. Unless you really know what you're doing, a bear hang at the end of a 30-kilometer day in the dusk or dark, probably not what you think it is. Get a certified container, know what goes in it, and know where it goes relative to your tent.
This episode of Bear Hanging brought to you by Ursack. Ursack, yes. Hang it in a tree, kids. Hang it in a tree.
One more thing that I'm deliberately not covering in this video, and that I'm going to name it rather than ignore it, the debate around sleeping with your food. Yes, I have slept with my food a handful of times in my lifetime, and every single time it was in a place like the foot of a glacier or somewhere way up high where the ecology simply doesn't support that kind of wildlife presence. There's nothing up there, no reason for anything to be there. But that is a very specific context. So I'm not going to open that debate in a video aimed at people camping in active bear habitat, which is all of us most of the time, in the valley bottoms, in the meadows, mid-elevation terrain, river corridors. In those environments, proper food storage is simply not negotiable. Everything to this point has been about the decisions you make before the tent goes up. Now, let's talk about once it's dark. Bear spray, not in your bag, not in your vestibule, not outside your tent somewhere, but right next to your head, inside the tent, ready to go. The first thing your hand finds in the dark, every night, every trip, you need to be ready in 5 to 8 seconds, which means it's already in your hand before you're fully awake. Clean camp. Cooking area, food storage area, sleeping area, 3 separate zones. The triangle is not a diagram, it's a discipline. A discipline that you build until it's automatic. Your food, everything with a scent is stored correctly, away from your sleep zone, every single time. The air horn at night. Remote backcountry, like I mentioned, these non-habituated environments, I keep mine inside my tent, right beside my bear spray. So if I hear something at 2 a.m., my first move is not to exit the tent. My first move is going to be sound. A long blast tells a non-habituated bear, for example, exactly what it needs to know, that this campsite has a loud, unexpected, unpleasant thing in it. And moving away is the better option. In most cases, that'll be the end of it. Now, you'll sometimes see advice about changing out of your cooking clothes at the end of every day. I'm going to be honest, I don't know anyone, including me, that actually does that. So I'm not going to tell you to do it either. Normal cooking odor on a base layer, not an issue. The issue is direct food contact. So if you've actually gotten food on your clothes in a meaningful way, let's say you spilled something, you splashed something, yeah, sure. Put those clothes in your food storage and get them away, and don't obviously store them in your tent. But for routine daily cooking smells, I mean, that's really not what we're talking about here. Back at the Red Deer River that night, the reason I pushed on for those extra kilometers wasn't only the encounter and the sign, it was that I was coming down into that valley. I could see that I had options. It's a wide valley, open ground, river access. It's not a bowl, there's no pass behind me, no cliffs boxing me in. If I needed to be somewhere else in the middle of the night, I could probably get there. The campsite decision and the night setup decision are the exact same decision. You make them in the same moment, looking at the same terrain, with whatever energy you've got left, but you cannot separate them. So it was a very confusing day. Everybody's super tired. It's late. We're tired. Gonna have a quick supper and get to sleep. And that's the last thing I'll say about the night. Don't wait until you're cooked to do it. When you're burning daylight at the end of a hard day, the pack's wearing you down, your legs are gone. Your risk assessment's degraded at that point. Exhaustion compromises your judgment in ways you genuinely don't feel in real time. The campsite selection, the setup, the protocols, do all of it with whatever's left in the tank before you're completely empty. Because those 20 minutes of setup are what let you sleep. And sleep, real restorative sleep, is what brings you out of the backcountry the same way you went in. Good morning. Hello, moon. Day 6. Best night's sleep so far. Oh my gosh. So here's what you own before the sun goes down. You own the campsite decision. 4 things to read: sign, food source, escape geometry, and the topography. You own knowing what kind of country you're actually in. Managed infrastructure or remote, random, dispersed camping. Habituated wildlife or non-habituated. The tools that work in one context may be completely useless in the other. And you own your night setup. Bear spray at your head, air horn right nearby, clean camp, one anchor decision made in the daylight when you can still see the terrain. Where am I going? The encounter, the reactive moment, that is downstream, if you'll pardon the pun, of all those choices. Make the upstream decisions well, and you've already done most of the work. And I stayed in the creek bed because I was trying to find a place maybe we could camp. And I did spy an opening down the way, so I stayed in the creek bed and kind of surfed the creek. We indeed did find camp for the night. Hey, if you got a trip coming up this summer and you want to talk through the specifics of a circuit, a route, a loop, a camping area that you're uncertain about, drop it in the comments. I read them all, I try to respond to them all, and if I've been there, I'm very happy to get into the weeds with you. And remember, if you like these videos, subscribe. I would love it. Anyway, questions or comments below, as I said. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.